It's actually a rare occasion that I can actually recommend a movie, but about a year ago I saw the movie Harriet, about the life of Harriet Tubman. Excellent movie. Harriet Tubman was born in 1822 into slavery, and as a young girl she was whipped and beaten by her masters. In fact, one of her jobs as a little girl, 5 or 6 years old, was to rock the baby, and if the baby cried, she would be whipped. Well, she recounted one time where she was whipped 5 times before breakfast. Well, early in life, one of the overseers threw this metal object intending to hit another slave, and it accidentally hit Harriet in the head, causing this brain trauma, which bothered her the rest of her life. She had these severe headaches. At the age of 27, under the threat of being sold and separated from her family, she escaped to Philadelphia. But finding her own personal freedom wasn't enough. She wanted to free her family and her friends. So this began her rescue missions to the South. Now, Harriet Tubman was very cunning. She would travel at night, usually during the winter, because the nights are longest during the winter. And she would plan her escapes on Saturdays, knowing that the names of the missing runaway slaves wouldn't hit the newspapers until Mondays, giving a little lead time. She knew all the safe houses, places to stay, stations on the Underground Railroad. In total, she led 13 missions, rescuing 70 slaves. One of the things I loved about the movie is it really brought out her religious faith. She was a very deep Christian, and she firmly believed God was directing her on these missions, telling her which way to go and how to avoid danger. She had vivid dreams and visions, and she never got caught. Now, what does the story of Harriet Tubman have to do with our readings? Well, Harriet Tubman became known as Moses because she led slaves out of captivity. And Isaiah, in our first reading, says that when the Messiah comes, he's going to be the new Moses. Listen, he's going to bring glad tidings to the poor, heal the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to captives, and release to prisoners. When the Messiah comes, there's going to be a new Exodus. It's not going to be the old Exodus where we're going to be freed from bondage from Pharaoh. We're going to be freed of our bondage from sin. We're not going to be freed by passing through the waters of the Red Sea. We're going to be freed from our sin by passing through the waters of baptism. And in the desert, we're not going to be fed with manna. We're going to be fed with the bread of life, Jesus' very body and blood. We're not going to be led to the promised land here in this world, the land of Israel. We're going to be led to the promised land of heaven. See, Advent is meant to awaken in us a longing for salvation. And the very first step of accepting Jesus as our Savior, as the new Moses, is to recognize, I need to be saved. I'm a sinner. I'm in bondage. Set me free, Lord. Second step to freedom, we got to desire it. We got to desire to let go of our sin, to set aside our attachments. You know, if somebody's going to successfully complete a recovery program to find sobriety, they got to want it. They got to desire it. Did you ever notice in many of the healings in the gospel, Jesus will say to the person, what do you want me to do for you? Do you want to see? Do you want to be healed? We have to want it. And finally, third, we got to follow Jesus. And that takes a great risk. Think about the risk it took for those slaves to follow Harriet Tubman. Some of them had to leave the only home they ever knew. They had to at times be willing, for a time at least, to let go of family or be separated from friends. And think of all the fears that must have gone through their minds. What happens if we get caught? Isn't this going to be a dangerous journey? Well, it takes a risk to follow Jesus. What will people think of us? Isn't it be hard to let go of what perhaps is familiar to us? Maybe our old habits that have become just part of our life. It takes a risk to follow Jesus. And you know what? On the journey, don't be surprised if we're like the Israelites in the desert. They pined to go back to the flesh pots of Egypt. Do you know on one of the journeys of Harriet Tubman, one of the slaves was scared and he wanted to go back. And Harriet Tubman got out a revolver and said, if you turn back, I'm going to shoot you. Well, the man kept going and he persevered and he made it. Harriet Tubman never lost a slave. Well, there are times where our sin is like in the words of Simon and Garfunkel's song, Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk to you again. Our sin is like an old friend beckoning us back. And we got to persevere. Don't turn back. Don't turn back on the journey. You know what helped the slaves find freedom? They were willing to be led. They kept their eyes on Harriet, and they listened to her commands. We have to be willing to be led out of our captivity. We have to follow Jesus, keep our eyes on him, and listen for his voice. We have to follow Jesus' commands, be obedient to the Lord. And then along the way, they found those safe havens, stations on the Underground Railroad, points of light in the darkness. We need each other. Our homes should be those sanctuaries, radiating the light of Jesus. Our homes should be refuges on the journey of life, on the perilous journey. You know, when Harriet found her freedom, it wasn't enough to find her own personal freedom. She wanted to liberate her family and friends. And so when we find freedom in Christ Jesus, it's not enough to just have it for ourselves. We want to free our family and friends. We want to lead them to Christ. Let me close with this. On Harriet Tubman's journeys, she would often sing versions of Go Down Moses and change the lyrics to indicate whether it was safe or dangerous to proceed. Well, as we continue our Advent journey, we all like the Christmas carols. But this Advent, let's think about that hymn, Go Down Moses, because Jesus is the new Moses, and he's leading us on a new Exodus, leading us out of our sin to the promised land of heaven.